Good morning, IIBM. My name is Balkrishna, and we are back again with yet another Power Packed session. I welcome you all to IIBM's induction program of 21st Batch Ignite 2020. Before we begin, let me take you through the itinerary of the session. The session is of 45 minutes of knowledge sharing, followed by 15 minutes of question and answers. So do post your interesting, igniting, and awakening question. It gives me great pleasure to introduce you to our today's speaker, Mr. Praful Talera. He says, I'm proud to be a cyber coolie with a lifetime mission to enable the re-emergence of Samudra Bharat, Samruddha Bharat. Mr. Talera has an experience of 35 years of supply chain management and logistics industry. He co-founded and built Dynamic Logistics with his father and late brother from modest beginning to enjoy the first mover advantage in the Indian logistics industries. Dynamic Logistics is the pioneer of the third-party logistics concepts in India, and it claims to fame as having introduced the just-in-time inventory systems in Tata Motors. Building a great DNA is his contribution to Dynamic Logistics, and his vision is to build Dynamic Logistics into an institution. A product of the Port of Singapore, he has undergone training in CFS management at Tanjong Pagar, Port of Singapore in 1986. Mr. Talera has traveled widely across the world to 48 countries in various Indian delegations. Education is a passion with him, and he has been invited for a TEDx event in Mumbai. And he has been a guest faculty at IIM Ahmedabad, the Johnson Business School of Cornell University, the University of Warwick, Babson School of Boston, Amity University, Symbiosis University, the Institute of Chartered Accountant, Indian National Bar Association, and other educational institutes, besides social and cultural organizations like RSS and other Rotary clubs. He has been an athlete and footballer during his school and college days, and is now an ultra marathoner and avid tracker who has summited Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania, Africa. Academically, Mr. Talera is Bachelor's of Commerce, Bachelor of Communication and Journalism, and LLB. Mr. Talera is a member of governing body Strategic Manufacturing Sector Skill Council, Unmanned and Autonomous Vehicle Association. He's a founder director in it. International Institute of Strategic Studies, Center for Advanced Strategic Studies, etc. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome and hear from the man himself, Mr. Praful Talera.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Wish you a very pleasant morning. Thank you, sir, for the kind words of introduction. I welcome the batch to Indus Business School, Pune, and I wish you a great career ahead. 2 years, I suppose, yes, of great learning. So I'm very happy to interact with you today, and thank you, Indus School and Dr. Marwa, for giving me this opportunity to interact with the children. Thank you, sir. So the topic I've chosen today is the geopolitical realignment of the world and the implications for the Indian economy. Geopolitics is a hybrid subject of geography and politics, and it has huge implications in the world. The subject by itself has been very neglected in India. It's very rarely discussed subject in our Indian forums. So, but I am a student of geopolitics. That's what I'm going to talk to you about. To build a reference to to build a context for today's talk, I just like to share something very simple with you. Is that the world in which we live today, we are 7 billion people, human beings, 7 billion of us. And just 100 years ago, we were just 1 billion. 1 billion has multiplied to 7 billion in 100 years. And what our forefathers were consuming 100 years ago, they're consuming, each one of us, 8 times that. So basically, we are consuming of 56 times of what the human race was consuming 100 years ago. This is a sure short recipe for disaster. We are heading for, they say, for the sixth mass extinction of the human race. And the earlier 5 extinctions were caused by a natural phenomena like an asteroid hit or something like that. But this could be caused by we ourselves. The way we are hurtling towards disaster is a very unsustainable model of development. It's a big question. How long will the human race survive at this rate at which we are living and consuming? Another 50 years at the max, but before that, what havoc could be caused, it could be anybody's guess. Global warming and all its implications is very scary. So this is a very unsustainable model of growth. So as we Indians, when we look forward to what it should be the future of India, this pandemic has given us enough time to reflect and think about what kind of future do we want to build. How have we reached this stage here? And how do we get there if we want to build a better future for ourselves? See, we Indians are, as it is, we are 130 crore Indians today itself and multiplying very fast. We will be the most populous nation in the world. We will beat China on that count for sure. And I'm sure you guys are also going to be contributing to that. But the rate at which we are going, and we are coming into the game quite late in the sense that we are not a superpower yet. We are a middle power. And the fight, actually, this pandemic is the fight between China and the USA for global dominance. It is the fight that who is going to lead the future. See, the Americans are the incumbents in the game and China is the challenger. So what this pandemic has highlighted is, one thing for sure, there is a lot of conspiracy theories that where did this, who released these, the coronavirus into the public domain? Did it happen in it happened in Wuhan, and the American president has been crying hoarse, blaming the Chinese. In fact, he called it the China virus. He didn't call it, he kept on repeating that it is the China virus and China is responsible for it. The Chinese have been denying it, and they said they have been blaming the Americans that they came and released it in China. But one thing for sure, it is either who have brought about all this big calamity on the world upon to us. This calamity has been brought upon to us by either the Americans or the Chinese. We don't know, and we might never know for the next 100 years what really happened till all these papers get declassified and things come out and in the public domain and people do research over it. So let it be at that. We need not go into further details on that issue. But what this coronavirus has done is revealed a lot of vulnerabilities in the system, in the global trading system, in globalization, in the supply chains of the world, in local and domestic economies all over the world. People don't know how to cope up with it. Governments are found totally lacking in the infrastructure to cope up with something of this order. The presidents and prime ministers have been afflicted by the coronavirus. Boris Johnson and Bolsonaro of Brazil, and so many people are they just don't know how to cope up with it. In fact, there's so much of politics around this now that it is unimaginable, and we just don't know when will all this settle down. But one thing for sure is, see, in every crisis, there is an opportunity. There's a huge opportunity in this crisis also. In fact, if you look at this, I call it an inflection point, and the world will never be the same again. It is going to change the world for sure and forever. Things will never go back to the usual normal self, earlier normal. So we are going to have a new normal. We already have so many new normals in place now. The way people are going to work, the commute, work from home is becoming a normal. I'm talking to you on the net. Webinars are the new normal. No one is calling them seminars. They all call webinars now. And I've been participating in so many over the last few months now. So, and why travel if you can get all this knowledge? There's so much knowledge out there on the, on the net. They say the only thing we need to find is to find ourselves. Everything else you can Google. Everything else you can Google. What you need to do is find yourself, know thyself. And so, coming back to geopolitics, I call this the Cold War version 2. What is happening between America and China is the Cold War version 2. And so, to understand it better, it would help if we reflected on Cold War version 1, which immediately started after the Second World War. And it was the fight between the USA and the USSR, the erstwhile USSR, which is now, which imploded and crumbled, and what you have left is Russia and a whole lot of stans, the Central Asian stans, which we never learned in our geography in school. And there's a whole lot of countries which are born in Eastern Europe and the whole balkanization of Eastern Europe. So these countries never existed before that. It was one big USSR, the Soviet republics. And this came down in 1989. That's what they say when the Berlin Wall came down. That was the end of the Soviet Union. And what happened thereafter is, for India, particularly, in 91, India changed track and changed its direction under Narasimha Rao. I consider that great man, Mr. Narasimha Rao, the father of modern India. It was under Narasimha Rao that India undertook reforms, and we changed from a socialist country and started veering. It's a big ship, so it takes a lot of time to. But the first set of reforms were ushered in by Narasimha Rao, with Manmohan Singh as Prime Minister, as Finance Minister, sorry. Narasimha Rao was the Prime Minister. And that's when things started changing in India. So the India you see today has been born out of those reforms. And we have been waiting for the last 30 years for the next set of reforms. So the second wave of reforms hopefully might be underway already under Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The biggest reform under the pandemic is the opening of the agriculture sector. I think we haven't even understood the implications of it. And we have yet to see the benefits of it, because in the pandemic, the supply chains are still very disrupted. And so, but it's a huge fundamental reform with tremendous implications for every household, in the sense that the farmer should get a better price for his produce, and the housewife should get a better value for her money, and maybe she would pay much less, because all the intermediaries, all the middlemen, all the artyas, and all the agricultural produce marketing committees are all been totally disrupted now with the pandemic. So it's a huge, massive reform which has already been done by stealth under the under the guise of the pandemic, not under the guise of the pandemic, with the pandemic as a cover. and it's already been undertaken. So it's gonna change the whole agricultural supply chain in this country, and definitely for the better, I feel, because we have become agriculturally self-sufficient in many ways. Last year we had a bumper harvest, and for many years we've had bumper harvest now. This year also it's projected that there would be a bumper harvest. But anyways, coming back to, sorry, I do a lot of doing and throwing and like to build up a perspective. So please be with me and remain with me so that you can connect the dots. So what is happening now is coming back to the global, what happened between the USA and the USSR. India changed in 91, but uh, so we changed 2 years after the fall of the USSR. China changed in 1978. China changed in 1978 under Deng Xiaoping. And so they have a 13-year lead over us in that sense. What they did in 78, we did in 91. But if you go to China, it looks like as if they are 30 years ahead of us, at least one generation ahead of us. And so many people are so much in awe of China that they feel that we can never ever catch up with China, or we can never ever match China. I think that is totally wrong. It's a very, very distorted view. We haven't understood the fundamentals. India and China are both very old civilizations. Both are 5,000-year-old civilizations. And 13 years in the life of a civilization is nothing great. See, we can easily catch up and maybe do a better than them. I believe that. I'm sure we'll do better than them. Now, why do I believe so? See, so this 13-year gap, and why does it look like 30 years is because the Cold War uh, one ended in 89, 1989. It ended in 1989. And we were 2 years later, we reformed 2 years later. So we are in a reactive mode. China, in that sense, was in a proactive mode because they had already uh, aligned with the Americans, and like Deng Xiaoping, Chairman Deng Xiaoping said, the premier, then how does it matter if the cat catches mice? What is the color of the cat? I mean, how does it matter whether it's a black cat or a brown cat as long as it catches mice? So he was a very practical man, and he built a capitalism with Chinese characteristics. Chinese characteristics, right? And that's how China started reforming, and that's what the China you see today. It has been born out of Deng's reforms. And what you see today is, in India is born out of Narasimha Rao's reforms. Narasimha Rao never got enough credit. In fact, he never got credit for what he has done for India. History, I'm sure, will give him a lot more credit for what has been achieved. The Congress, unfortunately, being a dynasty, is all about only the Nehru Gandhi family, and that's the sad part of it. But let's remember that dynasties always run out of steam. Dynasties don't have future in the modern world. Yes, dynasties will always be there, but after 3-4 generations, they run out of steam. And that's what has happened to the Gandhi family. They are not able to give the right leadership to the Congress. I am not. I'm apolitical. I am neither a Congressy or a BJP Bhakt, but uh, I believe that I am an Indian citizen and I have got every right to question everyone. All our political. I wouldn't say the word masters. They are our political servants. Like we have civil servants, these guys are political servants. But we always, because of our feudalistic legacies in India, we think they are our political masters. They are our political servants, and like Prime Minister Modi said, कि मैं आपका प्रथम सेवक हूँ. So they are all pratham sevaks or sevaks, and they better know that, and we better know as the people of India that we are the political masters. We are the masters. because we are the guys who give them a chance to serve us and say they better serve us well. They better serve us well. Otherwise, we have the power to get rid of them as well. So, what has happened now in India and what happened on the global scale, scene is the America USSR war. It brought down the USSR, and no, that was the end of communism. India had chosen a hybrid model of communism and capitalism, which we call socialism, and so that became the end of our socialist policies also. Though today also it is enshrined in our constitution that India is a socialist republic. But yes, that's what is there. It's good in a way because being a democracy, we need to take care and uplift a whole lot of poor masses and bring them to the middle class level of development, which we are doing quite okay, but we need deeper reforms, and I'm sure they are underway now. And in this Cold War version 2, what is happening is, see, the Cold War version 1, the Americans used every trick in the dirty book. Every trick in the dirty book was used to bring down the USSR. They used Islam khatre mein hai, they radicalized Islam, and they're now trying to moderate it. They appointed a Polish Pope. They used China to counterbalance Russia also. That's how all this investment was directed into China by America and its allies, the Europeans and the Japanese and the Koreans and the Australians and everyone. That's how all the development, all the industry was outsourced to China and to bring China into the mainstream, into the global mainstream. But China has got a mind of its own, and they think differently. They don't. They think their model is better than the American model. For us Indians going forward, we have three models to look up to. One or maybe four models. One is the European model. One is the American model. Then you had the Russian model, the USSR model, which failed. But we were modeled to quite a large extent on the Russian model in many ways, with the public sector and the commanding heights of the economy, and all that, which we are in the process of dismantling. So the Russian model is no more attractive to anyone now. And the Chinese model. So we have the European, the American, and the Chinese models to learn from and to follow. Now, see, we missed out on the Industrial Revolution as a nation. The Industrial Revolution happened in the UK and in Europe. And because we missed out on the Industrial Revolution, all these countries of Asia and Africa got conquered and colonized by imperial European countries. But today, India is a very, very different creature. It's a very different animal. And we understand this. So just because we missed out on the Industrial Revolution doesn't mean that we want to, or we will miss out on the communication and the computer revolution. We are determined to ride this revolution, and it plays to our strengths. Fortunately, it plays to our strengths. So India is already a software superpower, and this plays to our strength. So we are determined to ride this and use this to leapfrog and pole vault and emerge as a superpower. That is India's goal. So we need not follow the routes and the paths these three models took to reach where they reached. We can learn from their mistakes. We can leapfrog and use modern technology to our advantage. And we have that assimilation capacity in India today. So many of the top managers of the world in leading MNCs of the world are Indians. I mean, you look at Facebook and Google and everywhere in the world, there's so many Indians heading the list. It makes us very proud. And today in India, we have huge capacity to assimilate the best of modern technology. I myself have refused a collaboration with UPS, the global courier company in India, because I thought we don't need them. And this was in '98, way back. I said, thank you, very nice meeting you. And I chose to go it alone. And yes, there have been a lot of difficulties, but these are challenges. Difficulties are challenges. And if you have a vision, you can definitely overcome all these challenges and build something which you are proud of. So I'm very happy that I chose the path I chose of for dynamic logistics, and I see a great future for dynamic logistics going forward. Now coming to China again. China, like I said, was now this Cold War version 1 ended in '89, and the new one, China has started. Now the Cold War version 2 has started. Cold War version 2 is between USA and China. There are two different systems. One is a communist totalitarian system, one is a democracy, the Americans. And China is, the Americans feel and think that it has become too big for its boots and needs to be shown its place. And the Chinese think otherwise. They think the Americans have peaked and have gone beyond their prime. But this is what is going to play out going forward. And so, what the Americans have put in place is a Quad. The Quad is the coalition of four countries: uh, Japan, Australia, and India, in the like to contain China, and America from across the Pacific. So the Asia Pacific today is no more called the Asia Pacific. It's a political reconstruct now, and it's called the Indo-Pacific. So it is the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean there, and these four powers to contain and counterbalance China. So that game is already on, and this pandemic is the trigger for so much of industry to move out of China now. I mean, the Japanese are giving a huge subsidy for Japanese companies to leave China. Intel has Intel and so many other. I mean, Apple has already started production of its Apple iPhones in Chennai now, and a lot of industry is going to come to India. We are trying to attract, and not just India. It might move out of China into Vietnam, into the Philippines, into other countries in Southeast Asia, Thailand, and Mexico as well. But a lot of industry might come to India. India has got a huge market, local market, a domestic market, which they can cater to, and that is exactly what is the slogan which the Prime Minister has given, Atmanirbhar Bharat, and Make in India. Make in India is Make in India for the Indians and for the world, because you can get the advantages of the depth of the Indian market, the uh, labor arbitrages, the cost advantages of making in India, and the access to the Indian market and for the world. So that is already in place, the Quad, and you can expect a lot of foreign investment coming into India. There is, as per my knowledge, already a $1 trillion. We are a 2.67 trillion dollar economy as of now, and we are hoping to become a $5 trillion economy in the next 4 5 years, literally double the size of the Indian economy. And what will help us double the economy is a $1 trillion, that is almost slightly less, almost 70, 80% of the size of our economy is going to be invested into infrastructure. So a $1 trillion steroid injection in the next 3 4 years is going to make India to a $5 trillion economy. That is what the game plan is. And this $1 trillion is already lined up by way of being coordinated by the National Infrastructure Investment Fund, which is our own sovereign fund under the direct of the Prime Minister, under the direction of the Prime Minister's office. And this kind of money is going to be invested in the next 4 5 years. You can imagine we have never seen this kind of investment, and it's all going to go in infrastructure. We are benchmarking standards of infrastructure, and we have a huge lot to offer by way of 100 metros, 500 railway stations, and so many airports, and so many seaports, the Sagarmala and the Bharatmala projects. And yesterday, I was listening to a CII conference where the Reserve Bank of India chairman said that what will kickstart the economy is the investment into infrastructure. That's a huge amount of $1 trillion. It's literally like $300 billion every year for the next 3 4 years, 3 years now. So that is the kind of investment which is all lined up. It's all by way of the pension funds of Australia, Canada, the, the the sovereign funds from Abu Dhabi and the Middle East, and all this money is going to go into infrastructure. It will change the whole standard of living. We can't. When I was in college, I couldn't have dreamt of an India like this. When I passed out in college, we were wondering in '83. We thought our futures were doomed because, we couldn't see anything. There's no light at the end of the tunnel. But then in '91, when Narasimha Rao changed the whole direction of this country, we were so hopeful. And today we see an India which is very different to what India I could have ever imagined 30 years ago. So this geopolitical realignment between the fight between between China and America, India is going to be a big beneficiary. But we should never ever forget, in this world of real politics, there are no permanent friends and no permanent foes. Only permanent interests. We need to articulate India's interests far better. We need to understand our interests. So please remember and never forget, the Americans were with the Pakistanis till recently. But yes, now they see their interests and our interests are converging. But we need to build an India which is resilient, which is strong from within, and should never get swayed by any other foreign power. Yes, we can choose our partners and use it strategically to build and further our interests. We should always do that and never forget for sight of those goals. It is India's interest which should remain supreme. So this fight between China and China and the US, India is a swing state, and the way which we go will determine who remains on top or who is toppled, if at all they are toppled. So India is, yes, see, the Chinese, we can't choose our neighbors. China is the neighbor. We both go very old, ancient civilizational ties, 5,000 year old. In China, Buddhism is a big thing in China, though it is suppressed and most of it is underground. But the Buddha lives on in China. And so the Chinese are very wary of us Indians also. We are scared of the Chinese, but the Chinese look at us in very different ways. There is this Chinese very senior diplomat who has shaped their foreign policy, who says, his name was Hu Shi. He was chancellor of the Beijing University and China's ambassador to the US. He has said that China is, the Indians never conquered China. We never sent a single soldier, but we used Buddhism. Buddhism went there as a message of peace. It was not to conquer. We would rather conquer the heart than to dominate people. But the Chinese think that we have shaped their culture, because if you remove Buddhism from their culture, what is there? But anyway, this is a soft power which India possesses, and we are the grand masters of soft power in the world. We Indians always believe that the real enduring empires in the world are the empires of the mind. And we should always strive to create an empire of the mind. So, going forward now, to sum it up, I think we are reaching to the end of my talk, and we'll open up for question and answers. So, the geopolitical realignment is the Indo-Pacific, the Quad, and China being counterbalanced with India. So that's a great opportunity for India. And mind you, you are a very lucky generation. I wish I was born in your generation because I think India's greatest years are yet to come. And I always pray to God that I live to be 86 because I want to see 100 years of India's independence. So in 2047, I'll be 86. So I pray to God that, but God won't do everything. I need to do something myself. I need to get fit and do my bit so that I can be around to see those uh, glorious years when India is 100. I'd end with that. Thank you very much. And so you can start the question answer session. It's 11:44. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. I have a couple of questions for you. Yeah, so the first question is related to boycotting Chinese products. So everywhere on social media, everywhere people are saying that we should boycott, and government has also taken some of the steps by banning some of the apps. So in today's world, where most of the manufacturing industry is dependent on Chinese products, how effective and how possible it is to boycott China completely and then making ourselves Atmanirbhar.
See, we are addicted to so many of these Chinese products because China has become the factory of the world.
Right.
China has become the factory of the world. India doesn't intend to be the factory to the world also. We don't want to become the factory to the world. In fact, we rather choose to be a skill provider to the world, a service provider to the world, because our strengths lie in service. I mean, all the software service giants have come out of India, and even with the skilled manpower we have and the skilling development program in place, the NHDC, like we were talking before in the talk, India wants to be the skill provider, but China is a world leader in a lot of low category, goods, not very complex goods, but like maybe Rakhis. Like Rakhis around the corner now, next week. And why should we import Rakhis from uh, China? There are enough ladies, self-help groups, and so many of these mandals actually. Like if you have a cooperative like Lijjat, which can make Rakhis all year to be sold on this one occasion, there'll be enough Rakhis in this country, and we'll create so many jobs. So we need to think of such models. Like this is a very low cost model, which Rakhi is a very, like we get all the Akash Kandils, like these lanterns during Diwali which come from China. Why can't we produce them in India? So many of the low cost products we get from China could be easily produced in India on a much more distributed way, which will reduce the carbon footprint for those products also being sold in those markets. So that is one thing. Now for drones, almost 90% of the drones of the world is made by the Chinese. But what are drones? They are just rotors and fans and small machines and micro miniature things. Why can't we produce them? They're like toys actually. We can produce, but we need the volumes. Now, going forward, I was attending a conference on drones, and I'm a member of, I'm a founder director of the Drone Association, the UAVA Association of India. So, drones is nothing very high tech or something. It's high tech, yes, but still we have enough capability and competence and capacity in India to produce them on our own on a massive scale, and which will happen. So that's exactly what the Prime Minister has been talking about, the Atmanirbhar Bharat. I'm sure we can do it. I mean, but it'll take a few years to put all this in place. And it's good. I mean, this big jolt of the Chinese coming into Doklam and into Ladakh now has given us, it's a wake up call that we should not be trusting them so much.
Right, sir. Second is a follow-up question. Is it related to the investments which Chinese conglomerate and enterprises which are making in Indian startups? and other companies. If you see big startups like Big Basket, if we see Make My Trip, all these companies have Chinese investment. So, do you think this is also a part of their Cold War strategy? This is also a part of a strategy where they want to make India dependent on their on their money.
See, the Chinese have been very, very shrewd and very systematic in the way they have gone about doing things in the world. I recently read a report. The Chinese did something like it's called the British have called it the elite capture in the UK. They've captured the elite to such an extent that it'll take the elite in the UK. In fact, there's a big debate in the UK that we have crossed, the Britishers have crossed that turning point also. They've gone beyond the point of no return. But it's going to take them, now they've woken up, and it's going to take them quite some time to salvage what damage has been done. So elite capture. Now that's what they did in the UK. In India, see, China is almost 5 to 6 times the size of our economy. So they are all pumped up with testosterone. There's so much of money, and they've been throwing money left, right, and center. The Belt and Road Initiative, where they have gone and literally invested in so many countries and given loans that it's all debt diplomacy. So where they'll end up owning those countries, maybe like Sri Lanka and so many other countries, like we were talking before. The talk now they're building a string of pearl strategy. So the Chinese are using their money to do that. But let's not forget, we can never ever afford a British East India Company again, or any other company like that. British East India Company was a joint stock company which came to India for trade. And
Right.
look at what it happened. So everyone is welcome, but they have to play on our turf, in our stadium, on our terms, not on their terms. And we are going to dictate the terms. If you want to play in our market, you play as per our rules and for the benefit of our market. Not so that is very clear. I mean, I've had many interactions with the Prime Minister's office, officers from there and all, and it's very clear we are going to use our market to determine our strategy. Because if you want to play in our market, you play on our terms. Yes, the Chinese have invested, but now they have to face our conditions. Don't forget Enron. I don't know. I mean, these young students are too young to understand Enron, but you should have someone to come and talk on Enron as a case study of what happened in Enron and what happened to Enron in India and the whole implications of what happened to Enron. So India is not a very easy market to win. I mean, Walmart failed in India, and that's when they came the other route now through Flipkart. And just
Right.
recently, 2 days back, Flipkart bought Walmart India. So it's not that just because Walmart was the number one company in the US till Amazon came along, that it is going to be successful. Walmart has not succeeded in Latin America or in Europe. So if you have an elephant, and if you take that elephant, it's okay if you have the elephant in the forest, but if you take him to the desert, that elephant could become a liability. So this is a different ecosystem, and the Chinese have to operate in our ecosystem. Like when we go out, our companies go out, we operate in their ecosystems, and we have to thrive and survive and adapt. It's not easy. This is a different jungle out there. See, the word ecosystem like is in India. Yes, we have the Asiatic tiger in the Gir, but in Bengal you have the Royal Bengal tiger. There's no lion there. So the Royal Bengal tiger is the apex predator in this jungle. So likewise in India, if the Chinese companies they are to play, you have to play and you have to survive in this ecosystem. And it is a level playing field. The whole India, I mean, we Indians, for us Indians, it's so tough to survive in our own ecosystem. So you can imagine how difficult it can be for an American or a foreign player or a European or a Chinese or a Latin American player to survive in our system. It's not easy. And it's a level playing field. It applies to everyone. So I wish them all the best and I hope they can do well in the Indian market. Or now you have Reliance wanting to build its own 5G. And so it will trigger a lot of Indian companies to excel as well. So we should not fear competition. Those interests are well taken care of by our powers that be in Delhi.
Right.
So
Right.
we need not worry. You see, like Oyo was funded.
Yes.
Oyo, like Paytm is again funded by the Chinese. Look at what is happening to Paytm. It's not that every Chinese company or investment is going to be a threat to us.
Right, sir. Right, sir. So a lot of defense analysts were saying, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor (CPAC). It is also something which Pakistan believes that this
Yeah.
is going to sideline India, and probably in Southeast Asia they will create monopoly. How do you see this economic corridor?
See the Chinese have pumped in. I mean, they've promised to pump in almost $50 billion for the China-Pakistan economic corridor, right from Gwadar on in Balochistan
Yes.
to through POK, through our Gilgit Baltistan area into China, into Xinjiang. So, and they want to avoid the Malacca dilemma by using this route. It's fine to, but remember they can't use it for energy because to pump oil almost 18,000 feet and then pump it across a few thousand kilometers into eastern China where the markets are, it's not a viable economic proposition. The Chinese have built Gwadar, we have built Chabar just 70 kilometers away in the Baluchistani part of Iran. And so we have two parallel ports there, one built by the Chinese, one built by the Indians, and that is to bypass. For us, it is the to bypass Pakistan to go into Afghanistan. And we Indians have invested a lot of money uh, in
Chabahar.
in Chabar, $200 million. I've been to Chabar myself. I've traveled extensively in Iran and I went to the Caspian as well and in Pakistan as well. I've been to Lahore, Karachi, Islamabad for a SAARC summit. So see, yes, it's a see. There's a lot of asymmetry between India and China, and a lot of asymmetry between India and Pakistan. So China is hoping to exploit that asymmetry in favor of themselves by investing so much in China, but in Pakistan. But what they are doing in Pakistan, we are also doing in Vietnam. Don't forget, India is doing a lot of things in Vietnam. We sold them the BrahMos missiles in Vietnam. Vietnam is a strategic partner, and
Right.
so this is a game of counterbalance. And India operates in a very different way. So many times we Indians ourselves don't appreciate, don't know about what India is doing. Being so many of
Right.
us, our media is full of negative stories. We need to tell the positive story more often. And India is, uh, see, because of our democracy, we move in a different way. See, it's a
Right.
we move sideways, forward, two steps backward, two steps forward, one step backward, all sorts of movements. China is just there like this. I mean, so but these are different approaches. In the long run, I believe that India is an existential threat to China, and they fear that a lot. Because if we can achieve the growth model of China and China's prosperity, remaining a democracy, the Chinese will start questioning the whole purpose and the existence of the Communist Party of China. So we remain a big existential threat to China. Remember that.
Right,
And
sir.
I think we Indians are too much in awe of China. We need not be so much in awe of China. I am certainly, for one, am certainly not in awe of China. There are very many weaknesses in the Chinese system. There are many fault lines which we should exploit. And yes, they have built that highway through the Indian sovereign territory.
Right.
In POK, which we have objected. India refused to send any representative for the Belt and Road Initiative, that conference they had in Beijing. So India has objected to it at the international level also that this is not done. And we have our suspicions, and maybe that is one of the reasons that CPEC is one of the reasons what they are trying to do in Galwan Valley and all. And that is also was one of the reasons why Kargil happened.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, next question is related to the same thought. The way China is exploiting Pakistan, right? Similarly, don't you think America is exploiting India against China?
See, understand one thing, like I told you when I ended my talk. See, there are no permanent friends, no permanent foes in global diplomacy and in the world of real politics. There are permanent interests. And we Indians need to articulate our interests better. See, earlier during the non-aligned movement and during the Cold War, we were with the Russians in many ways because so much of our defense hardware is of Russian origins. But today, after the Cold War, India has taken a different stance. And it's a very complex world. We have to build relations with every country and keep protecting and furthering our strategic interests. See, strategic autonomy is very important in whatever we do. So we Indians need to protect our strategic interests. See, just for information, like China-Pakistan economic corridor, there are one, since we are in Pune, I like to bring this on record here. There are more than a lakh people of Maratha origins, Maratha,
Okay.
in Baluchistan. And they
Okay.
go back almost 350 years. In 1761, when the Marathas lost at the Battle of Panipat, those prisoners of war, their descendants are the guys who are living in Baluchistan today. They speak a hybrid Baluchi Marathi mix of language, and you can check this out on Google. Please all the students, I would urge them to check this out. So, and Baluchistan was part of the. If you go into the origins of Baluchistan, the Khan of Kilat, and Karachi was under the Bombay presidency during the British Raj. Let's not forget that. So Baluchistan, if Baluchistan breaks away from Pakistan, just imagine what could happen. If what happened to the USSR, if China imploded, I'm sure Pakistan would implode as well. But we wouldn't want to be the trigger
Right.
because if Pakistan imploded by itself, the Chinese would occupy it. So we'd rather wait and bide our time and see what happens. We'd rather build a stronger India. We have to build our core. Like when you do physical exercise, it's all about building your core. Same thing, India needs to build its core. We have to become a larger economy. We have to become the third largest economy before and see what happens and play again. So we have to play again to further India's interests. We should never ever suck up to the Americans like I ended my talk with. I said that. See, because let's not forget they were with the Pakistanis till recently, the Americans. So don't
Right.
be in awe of the Pakistanis or the Chinese or the Americans. We have to build our self-confidence and build an India which we will be proud of. And we have everything in India to be that.
Right.
What we need to do is to put our house in order. We Indians need to put our house in order.
Right. Right.
That's all we need to do.
Sir, any final words or final advice you want to give to students?
No, I am a student myself of geopolitics. It's too complex a subject. But I would like to tell the students that please take interest in, studies are fine, but do develop wider horizons and read on topics like, I would recommend C. Raja Mohan. Please do read C. Raja Mohan. There are a lot of good authors who write on Kishore Mehbubani and a lot of, see, geopolitics is a very, very fundamental subject. Please
Right.
take it, and you'll understand the world better and the pandemic better and what is going to happen after the pandemic and how India is going to come out of it far better if you understand geopolitics. So I still remain a student of geopolitics. I can never claim to be an expert. I keep learning and reading. It's a combination of history, politics, science, technology, geography. Geography is your destiny. Let's not forget. And I would like to end that unless, like, it's my final thing is that unless India becomes a Samudra Bharat, we can never become a Samruddha Bharat. Let's not focus too much on China and India, on Pakistan, sorry. We should focus on the Indian Ocean and the Indian Ocean rim of countries. There are 44 neighbors we have across the ocean, immediate neighbors, just with the ocean between us, like Oman and India. There's nothing between Oman and India, it's except the Indian Ocean, the Arabian Sea. So right from South Africa to Australia, they are all our neighbors across the ocean. Let's leverage that. And there is a huge Indian diaspora around there. There are 3 million people of Indian origins in South Africa alone. Bengali is spoken in Bangladesh and in India. In Pakistan, they speak Urdu. In India, we speak Urdu as well. If you go to the Middle East, there are, there are 500,000 Indians wanting to come back from Dubai alone, and 8 lakh people from Indians from Kuwait wanting to come back. So if they come back, you can build good linkages across the ocean also. It's not that. So India has got a very bright future, and I am sure these students are on the threshold of a great future. I wish you all the very best. Thank you. Thank you, all of you. Thank you, sir, for
Thank you
giving
so
me
much.
this opportunity once again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your words of wisdom. On behalf of IIBM family, I would like to thank you for this session. And we also want to extend our gratitude for hiring our student for internship and final placements. We wish you a great success in all your future endeavors. This is not the end, but the beginning of our vibrant association. With the hope of meeting you again, long live IIBM and Jai Hind, sir.
Thank you, Pandit ji.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.